didn't see a neighbor, they saw a threat in human skin. When a decorated veteran returns home for peace, she's met instead with sirens, suspicion, and drawn guns, all for unlocking her own front door. But when her trained military dogs step forward, everything stops. What happens when a woman trained for war has to fight just to be seen in her own neighborhood? Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story will leave you questioning everything. Vanessa Stewart didn't flinch when she saw the woman staring. She'd barely cut the ignition when her eyes met the narrowed gaze from across the street. Suburban white woman, mid-50s, blonde bob tucked behind both ears like it was regulation. The kind who wore posture like a badge and entitlement like perfume. One hand clutched a pink yoga mat, the other held a smartphone, angled just low enough to not look obvious. But Vanessa knew that posture, that stance, that smirk tucked behind concern. She exhaled slowly. Not fear, not frustration, just fatigue. The long drive from Augusta was still buzzing in her knees, and her lower back throbbed from hours behind the wheel. But it wasn't the trip that made her tired. It was moments like this. The woman's lips moved. No sound, but Vanessa knew the kind of sound that usually came with those lips. Does she belong here? Should we call someone? Why is she backing into that driveway? She reached up to tap the garage opener clipped to her visor. The door groaned as it lifted, and behind it, the faint glow of the motion light flickered on inside the garage. Her home. Bought it herself. No mortgage help, no cosigner. Just her name and the VA loan she earned crawling through sand and gunfire. Vanessa didn't smile at the woman. She didn't wave either. She just turned back to her mirrors and reversed the SUV slowly into her driveway. Wide enough to fit the vehicle. Clean concrete, no clutter. The front yard was trimmed, edged, mulched. She kept it like a soldier kept a locker, presentable and inspection-ready. In the back of the SUV, 2 crates sat secured against the interior wall. Inside, Ace and Echo lay quietly, their ears twitching slightly, but bodies still. Belgian Malinois, sharp, trained, and waiting. As the car settled into park, Vanessa grabbed her wallet and lifted her phone to check for messages. A missed call from her cousin. A text from her neighbor, Mr. Landry, reminding her about bulk pickup this week. Nothing urgent. She paused before reaching for the door handle. Across the street, the woman was still watching, still whispering, still recording. Vanessa opened the door anyway. She stepped out wearing her Fort Hunter hoodie, faded from years of wash, and black joggers tucked into scuffed combat boots. Not a fashion statement, just muscle memory. The scent of road dust and dog fur still clung to her sleeves. She didn't ask the woman what she was doing. She didn't offer an explanation for where she'd been or what she'd done today. Because this was her house, her street, her name on the damn deed. Vanessa walked around to the back of the vehicle and opened the hatch. The dogs blinked, alert. One low whine from Echo, the younger of the 2. But they didn't move. She clicked her tongue once. That was all it took. They stilled. She was reaching for one of the grocery bags when she heard it. The sound of sirens. Close and closer. Then too close to be going anywhere but here. Vanessa froze, one hand still on the strap of the canvas bag. The SUV's rear lights reflected red and blue as the first cruiser turned into the cul-de-sac. Then a second, then a third, then a fourth. It was too fast for anything casual. Too much for anything reasonable. They didn't slow. They accelerated. 2 flanked her driveway, while another skidded slightly into position behind her car, cutting off any exit. Doors swung open before the wheels stopped turning. Officers stepped out, weapons unholstered, arms stiff and pointed. Step out of the vehicle. Vanessa didn't move. She was already out. Her hands were empty, open, visible. Hands where we can see them, now. "I live here," she said calmly, loud enough to carry. "My name is Vanessa Stewart. This is my house." "Put your hands up." She did. Palms skyward, arms lifted, not fast, not slow, just deliberate. Behind her, Ace and Echo stirred. She glanced back, just once, subtle, and made a sharp clicking noise with her teeth. They knew the command. "Stay down. Wait." The officers approached in a half-moon formation. One crouched behind her neighbor's hedge, another flanked toward the garage, his boots heavy on the concrete. The leader, tall, white, early 30s, buzz cut so clean it looked like it hurt, stepped forward with his gun aimed center mass. "We got a report of a break-in. You match the description?" Vanessa blinked. "This is my house," she repeated. "My ID is in my back pocket. My name is on the mailbox. I just got home." The officer didn't lower the weapon. From the corner of her eye, she saw the yoga mat woman, still filming, still whispering. "Don't move," the officer barked. "No, who else is inside?" "No one, just me. I was helping my cousin move in Augusta. Got home 5 minutes ago." He didn't answer, just nodded to the officer near the hedge. The man disappeared around the side of her house. Vanessa's fingers trembled slightly, but she held them up. She'd done this before. Different language, different country, different uniform. But she knew this drill. "Ma'am," the officer said, "I'm going to need you to lie down on the ground." She looked at the cracked line in her driveway, then at her boots, then at his eyes. "I'm not a threat," she said. "Let me get my ID. You can confirm it in 30 seconds. Down, on the ground." "Ace, Echo, stay," she snapped, without turning her head. A murmur from behind her. One of the officers had noticed the crates, the dogs inside. Their stillness, their intensity. "What's in the back?" the officer behind her asked. "My dogs." "What kind of dogs?" "Military, Belgian Malinois. Don't move toward them." The one near the hedge reappeared, slightly winded. "No signs of forced entry. Back door's locked." "I told you," Vanessa said. The lead officer didn't budge, didn't blink. "You could have stolen the keys. That woman called the police because she didn't recognize me. That's not probable cause." He stepped closer. "You got a smart mouth." She locked eyes with him. "I got a right to stand in my own driveway?" Another silence fell over the scene. Red and blue washed over her garage, over the faces of her dogs, over the badge stitched to the inside of her hoodie. She didn't reach for anything. She didn't move. And still, the moment felt like a coin spinning on edge. A neighbor across the street stepped outside. Mr. Landry, white, retired Air Force. "Vanessa," he called, "you all right?" Her eyes didn't leave the officer. "I'm good, Mr. Landry." He walked further into his yard. "Officers," he said. "She lives there. Has for 3 years, works with veterans." The officer with the buzz cut didn't respond. But his shoulders shifted. Something behind the curtain cracked. One of the younger officers leaned closer and whispered to him. A pause. Then the gun dipped slightly. Vanessa didn't drop her arms. Not yet. Not until someone gave her a reason to believe they saw her, really saw her. But the shift had started. And the woman with a yoga mat across the street finally lowered her phone. The street was too quiet for all that noise. 4 cruisers deep. Engines rumbling like wolves circling. Radios crackling with clipped codes. Red and blue lights bleeding across white siding, asphalt, the dented surface of Vanessa Stewart's silver SUV. Her arms were still raised. Her fingers, slightly curled, had started to go numb. None of the officers had holstered their weapons. The one in charge, buzz-cut, square-jawed, his badge flashing under the strobes, hadn't moved from his stance. Vanessa didn't know his name, but she knew men like him. Eyes that looked past you, not at you, tone like he wasn't talking to a person, just a situation. She didn't twitch, didn't blink, just waited. "Ma'am, you got dogs in the car?" he asked finally, without lowering his weapon. "Yes. 2. They're trained. They haven't moved." Another officer, younger, leaned slightly to get a look through the back window of her SUV. He stepped back immediately. "They're watching us," he muttered. "Good," Vanessa said. "Means they're doing their job." Buzzcut frowned. His stance hardened again. "That's supposed to be a threat?" "No, that's me trying not to die in my driveway." A pause. Heavy. Dense. She could hear one of the dogs shift. Just a small weight adjustment inside the crate, but it was enough. One of the officers flinched. Vanessa didn't move her head, but her voice changed. Deeper. Firmer. "Echo down." A quiet thump as paws repositioned. Silence followed. No growl. No bark. "I want to reach for my wallet now," Vanessa said slowly. "It's in my back pocket. I'm going to show you my ID." "No sudden moves," Buzzcut warned. "Do it slow." "I'm a former staff sergeant, United States Army," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I train military working dogs. I'm not your threat today." Buzzcut didn't respond. Vanessa turned slightly, just enough to expose the edge of her back pocket. Her movements were precise, deliberate, as though choreographed. One finger looped around her wallet's edge, pulling it out and holding it up. "Do you want me to toss it?" "Place it on the hood." She complied. Another officer, Officer Huen, she noticed from his name tag, approached and retrieved it. He flipped it open, then stepped back to the lead officer, murmuring something too low to hear. Buzzcut took it, studied the ID, then looked at her, then back at the ID. "She's local," Wen said. "Address matches the mailbox. She's former military, just like she said." Buzzcut didn't lower his weapon, yet. His jaw tensed. Vanessa kept her arms up. Across the street, Gretchen Marks, phone-wielding neighbor, was still watching, but now her expression had changed. The confidence had cracked. Her mouth was tight, eyes unsure. She stepped back into the shadow of her porch, like the world might forget she was the one who lit the match. Another neighbor, an older black woman in a floral robe and slippers, opened her door and peered out. Vanessa could see her lips moving in prayer. It didn't make her feel safer. Buzzcut finally spoke. "You could have had a key to the house. You could have taken it from someone. Just showing us ID doesn't prove you didn't break in." Vanessa dropped her arms. He tensed again. She didn't care anymore. "I'm not walking you through every reason I have to be here," she said. "I live here. The garage opener's on the visor. I have mail inside. I have 2 dogs that are worth more in training than your entire cruiser. But if none of that matters to you, then go ahead, arrest me, detain me, do what you need to do." When Ying glanced at Buzzcut, uneasy. "She's clean, man." Buzzcut looked around. Something about the situation had shifted. The presence of witnesses, the stillness of the dogs, the neighbor confirming her name. Still, his pride couldn't let go. He holstered his gun with more force than necessary. "Let's verify inside," he snapped. "If she's lying, we'll find out." "I didn't invite you in," Vanessa said coolly. He ignored her and nodded to Nguyen and the female officer near the hedge. Miller, according to her badge. "Watch the perimeter." The moment the weapons lowered, Vanessa clicked her tongue twice. The back of the SUV opened. Ace and Echo stepped down together, alert but controlled. They didn't bark, didn't bare teeth, just stood beside Vanessa, one on each side like twin shadows. Buzzcut backed up slightly. "Control your animals." She said. "They're better trained than half your squad." The older woman in the robe muttered. "That's right," though not loud enough for most to hear. Buzzcut didn't respond. His hand rested near his holster, even with the gun put away, a man still craving control. Vanessa stepped toward her front door with the dogs flanking her. She didn't invite him, didn't wait for his permission, just moved. He followed, watching the dogs like they might sprout weapons. Inside, her living room was neat. Photos of her in uniform hung on the wall. A certificate from the Department of Defense framed above the mantel. The couch was covered with a folded fleece blanket, a dog bed in the corner, an empty bowl near the kitchen. Buzzcut stood in the doorway, hands on his belt, eyes scanning like a scanner could find guilt. "You want to admit now you overreacted?" she asked, back turned as she placed her keys on the table. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped out and barked, "Clear." The others began dispersing. Nguyen returned her wallet, eyes apologetic. He didn't say sorry. Maybe he wasn't allowed to, but his face said enough. Buzzcut lingered on her porch. "You should be more careful." What, existing?" He didn't have a reply. She took a step closer, voice low. "One wrong twitch, one bark, one excuse. I'd be a name on a mural right now." Buzzcut gave her one last look and turned. The cruisers began pulling away. Only Nguyen lingered behind, watching her gently rub Echo's ear. "You did good today," he said, his voice barely audible over the engines. Vanessa didn't look at him. "I did what I had to do." Then she closed the door. The lights faded from her walls. The house was quiet again. But the silence wasn't peace. Not yet. Ace had once sniffed out an IED buried beneath 7 inches of Iraqi gravel. The memory came back fast, like breath on the back of her neck. Vanessa could still see the tan powder lifting in slow clouds behind her boots, the way the sun beat down like it hated them all, the silence before the warning bark, the way her heart had dropped so hard it felt like it snapped free from its roots. Ace hadn't barked today, but Vanessa recognized the tension in his body. Same posture, same storm just beneath the surface. After the officers left, she sat on the edge of her couch. Echo curled against her feet. Ace settled under the table, ears twitching. They weren't just dogs, they were her team. It had been 6 years since her last deployment, 9 since the night her unit was ambushed on a recovery mission outside Mosul. She remembered the pop of gunfire, the spray of sand, the whistle of a bullet slicing past her helmet. And the moment Ace lunged toward an armed insurgent from 40 yards out. One bite, one takedown, one life saved. He wasn't just a dog, he was a soldier. And he had just been treated like a pet in the presence of suburban suspicion. She got up and walked to the hallway where the old canvas duffel still sat. Inside, training collars, medals, unused trauma kits. A photograph folded in a side pocket. Her and Ace, both younger, both covered in sand, smiling wide beside a military Humvee. Vanessa ran a finger across the edge of the photo. "Did everything right," she whispered. They both had. She pulled her hoodie off and walked to the bathroom. Her reflection stared back, tired but clear-eyed. She splashed water on her face. Counted to 10. "You're home now." But home didn't always mean safe. She stepped back into the hallway and found Echo sitting straight up, tail still, ears raised. Ace had followed. She didn't need to ask. She knew. They were listening for footsteps. And deep inside, so was she. Vanessa didn't speak. She just moved to the front window, parting the edge of the curtain an inch to look outside. Gretchen's porch light was still on. So was her living room. Behind the sheer white drapes, the silhouette of a woman passed by once, twice, pacing. Good. Let her pace. Let her wonder what kind of chaos her little suspicion could have unleashed. Vanessa let the curtain fall shut. She turned, took a deep breath, and walked to the crates. Ace went in first, curling into a tight circle with a heavy sigh. Echo hesitated, his dark eyes fixed on her. "It's all right," she said, crouching to his level. "You did perfect." He stayed still, his gaze locked on hers, not fully believing it yet. "I'm safe now," she whispered, brushing her hand over his neck. "We're home." That word had weight now. It didn't mean sanctuary the way it once did. It meant vigilance. It meant knowing your address by heart, having your ID memorized, your deeds in a folder near the front door just in case someone came knocking or barging. Vanessa sat back on her heels. Her knees ached from the pressure, the long day. Her stomach growled, but food didn't matter. Not yet. Her phone buzzed on the counter. The text from her cousin. "You get home okay? Let me know. Love you." She replied simply. "Home. Long story. We'll call in the morning." She didn't have the words yet. Not for family, not for anyone. She stood and let the silence fill the house again. Not the tense, waiting kind from earlier, but the hollow silence that comes after adrenaline fades. It crept up her spine like cold water. She walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and stared into it without seeing anything. Her mind wasn't here. It was back there again. Back in the Middle East. Back in the convoy, the desert heat seeping through her uniform, the taste of grit in her teeth. Back when Ace was just a pup with too much drive, and Echo was still learning how to heal without dragging her off her feet. She remembered the day their outpost was shelled. She'd been eating an MRE when the warning alarm went off. Before she could reach the bunker, the world exploded. Smoke, screams, shrapnel flying like hornets. She'd dropped flat, heart hammering, arms covering her head. When the dust settled, Ace had wedged his body across her chest like a weighted blanket. He wasn't trained to do that, he just did it. She never forgot. Not then, not now. She blinked herself back to the present. The kitchen light buzzed overhead. She shut the fridge and leaned against the counter. Ace's tail thumped once from the crate. Not loud, just enough to say, "I'm here." That was the thing about dogs. Real ones, not pets. Partners. They felt it before you said it. They knew the scent of unease, the tremor of fear behind the muscle. Vanessa walked back to the living room and dropped into the couch, eyes catching the framed photo of her graduation from canine training school. She was standing in uniform, fresh-faced, one hand resting on Ace's head. They'd been through every certification course together. Obedience, narcotics, explosives, search and rescue. Ace had passed them all. Echo came later, a rescue from a failed training program in Texas. Too sensitive for combat, but perfect for companionship. Together, they were her team. She grabbed the remote, but didn't turn the TV on. The silence wrapped around her, too thick now to pierce with sound. Instead, she reached for her laptop. It booted slowly, giving her too much time to think. She opened a blank document. Typed one word. Report. Old habits. After every incident overseas, every mission, there was always a report. Debrief, timeline, chain of events. It made the chaos feel knowable, tame, accountable. She began typing. 14 hours. Arrived home in Rockford Heights. Noticed unidentified woman observing me from across the street. 18 hours. Multiple police units responded to 911 call claiming break-in at my residence. Units drew weapons upon arrival. 21 hours. Complied with commands. Presented identification. Canines remained in vehicle. Officers surrounded property. Landscape, plus... She paused. Her fingers hovered over the keys. This wasn't a war zone. This wasn't a debriefing. This was her driveway. And she had still felt like an intruder. She closed the laptop slowly and set it aside. Through the cracked window, she could hear a distant siren again. This one moving away, down a different road, towards someone else's emergency. She wondered if they'd get the same treatment, or if it would end differently. The floor creaked slightly as Echo rose from the crate and padded over, laying his head on her foot. She ran her fingers through his fur, grounding herself in the moment. They were safe. For now. But tomorrow? That was another battlefield. The next morning, Vanessa didn't wake to birdsong or sunlight. She woke to the sound of her own front door creaking slightly in the wind, a sound she'd trained herself to register no matter how deep her sleep. Her eyes opened fast. Instinct. She sat up straight on the couch where she'd fallen asleep in her hoodie, a throw blanket half tangled around her legs, Echo snoring lightly at her feet. Her phone said 6:13 IEM. She took a second to breathe before rising. Her spine cracked with the stiffness of a rough night's rest. She hadn't bothered going to bed. Some part of her didn't want to feel comfortable yet, like she hadn't earned it. In the kitchen, she brewed a pot of coffee, barely registering the clicks and whirs. She stared out the back window at the dew-laced grass. Ace stood at attention just inside the sliding door, tail stiff, posture alert. He hadn't moved all morning except to rotate his ears toward every little creak or car door outside. "Stand down," she said quietly. He blinked once, his shoulders eased. She took her coffee black, no time to sweeten bitterness. By 6:47, she'd changed into a long-sleeved black shirt and cargo pants, hair pulled back into a tight, low bun. She couldn't help it. Her body defaulted to preparation, to readiness. She clipped a pouch to her belt, not with weapons but with backup dog tags, a spare whistle, and a few protein bars. Echo sat near the entry, watching her move like he knew today wasn't going to be simple. She opened the door. The street was quiet. The same trimmed lawns, the same gentle morning light on mailboxes and SUVs. But it all looked like a photograph now. Flat, suspicious, a little too quiet. She stepped onto the porch. Across the way, Gretchen Marks's blinds twitched. Vanessa saw it, saw the way they quickly snapped shut like a scared animal retreating. Good. That meant she still remembered last night. Maybe that meant she was thinking twice about the power of assumptions. Or maybe not. Vanessa took Ace and Echo out on leash for their usual half-mile walk. Not for exercise, for routine, for visibility, for defiance. They moved in perfect sync beside her, heads high, ears swiveling to track the neighborhood sounds. A leaf blower 2 streets over, a car door slamming, a jogger passing with a double take. When she got back, she saw the note. Folded paper, wedged into the edge of her front door. Handwritten in stiff cursive. No envelope. No name. "I'm sorry for what happened. I didn't know. I thought something was wrong. I hope you can understand." No signature. She didn't need one. She held the note in her hand for a long time before folding it again and tucking it between the fridge and the wall. Not worth keeping, not worth throwing away. Just there. Liked the incident. Later that morning, she stood at the kitchen island sorting through her mail. Real estate flyers, a utility bill, a newsletter from the local Veterans Support Center, when her phone buzzed. Private number. She debated ignoring it, then answered. "Hello? Miss Stewart?" A woman's voice, measured, professional. "This is Captain Ellen Price with the Rockford Heights Police Department. I'd like to speak with you briefly about what happened yesterday." Vanessa inhaled through her nose. "Go ahead. First, I want to apologize. We've reviewed the body cam footage. I'd personally spoken with Officer Nguyen and reviewed his report. The actions taken during the call did not reflect our department's standards of conduct." Vanessa let the words sit. "Is that an apology?" she asked. There was a pause. "Yes, ma'am, it is." Vanessa didn't respond. Captain Price continued, "We're currently conducting an internal review. The caller reported a burglary in progress. The description was vague, but It's clear your presence alone was what triggered the response. We're not proud of that." Still, Vanessa said nothing. "I understand if you don't wish to engage further. But if you're open to it, I'd like to meet with you in person. Just you and me. Not formal, just a conversation." "I'll think about it," Vanessa said. "That's all I ask. And again, I'm sorry." She hung up before Vanessa could reply. Vanessa stared at the phone like it might change into something else, maybe something real. But all it did was sit there, quiet, heavy. She turned back to her kitchen window and watched the slow crawl of another patrol car easing past the neighborhood entrance. Not speeding, not chasing, just gliding, patrolling, scanning. A knock on her door interrupted the silence. This time it wasn't a cruiser. It was a neighbor, Mr. Landry. White, mid-60s, bald, with a thick gray mustache and a posture that gave away his Air Force background before he ever said a word. She opened the door. "Morning, Vanessa," he said, holding a paper grocery bag. "Brought muffins. Cheryl made too many again." Vanessa looked at the bag, then back at him. "You always bring muffins the morning after an armed standoff." He chuckled softly, but his eyes were serious. "No, but I always show up when I see something that ain't right." She stepped aside, letting him in. Ace sniffed once and then trotted off. Landry knew the dogs. He'd lived across from her since she moved in. Never once made her feel like she didn't belong. Never once stared too long. It was the one locality he'd loved. "Cheryl steamed," he said, setting the bag on the counter. "Said if she sees that Gretchen woman at yoga again, she's going to toss a dumbbell at her." Vanessa cracked a smile. "Tell Cheryl I appreciate the thought." He nodded, growing serious again. "You all right?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "I wasn't scared, not exactly. I knew how fast things could go wrong. I knew how easily one loud bark, one wrong movement, anything could have ended it." Landry nodded slowly. "I know." They stood in silence for a while. "You ever think about moving?" he asked gently. "I just got here. I mean, after something like this?" Vanessa shook her head. "This isn't something I move away from. This is something I confront." Landry's lips tightened, but he nodded. "Well, you ever need a witness, you got one." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thanks, Landry." After he left, Vanessa opened the muffin bag and placed it on the counter. She took one and sat down. Ace and Echo settled near her. She stared out the window again, but this time it felt less like a battlefield. It still wasn't peace, but it wasn't silence either. And that mattered. Gretchen Marks never knocked. She didn't need to. People like her didn't ask permission to enter a space. They simply assumed it was theirs to evaluate, to patrol with concerned gazes and half-charged phones ready to record evidence of anything that didn't look familiar. That morning, though, Gretchen stood on her own porch. Still, rigid, arms crossed, the very image of self-righteous restraint. Acceleration. Rise. Vanessa saw her through the living room window as she was folding a towel on the couch. She didn't react, didn't move to open the door or close the blinds, just stood with the towel in hand watching the woman pretend not to want her attention. She took a deep breath, offering Vanessa, Mrs. BJ, and the man, the husband, the brother. Gretchen took one step down, then another. She glanced toward Vanessa's house once, then away, as if her eyes might betray something. She held something in her hand, a container of some sort. Muffins, of course. The smart question. Vanessa's jaw clenched. Was there a manual, a guidebook for white guilt in suburbia? Step 1, call the cops on a black neighbor. Step 2, deliver baked goods and pretend like trauma could be sweetened with cinnamon. She turned away from the window. Let her knock. Let her try. But no knock came. Vanessa stood by the door, waiting, arms folded. Ace shifted at her side, alert but calm. Echo sat quietly near the hallway entrance, watching his handler the way he always did when her breathing changed, even just a little. Eventually the footsteps faded. The container never made it up the steps. When she looked again, Gretchen was walking back across the street. The muffins were left on the front step. An offering. A bribe. Maybe a confession. Vanessa left them there. 2 hours passed. She worked through her usual routines, cleaned the floor by hand, reorganized the utility drawer, checked the perimeters of the backyard. The habits grounded her. War had taught her that survival was often found in the rituals, the mundane acts that reminded the mind it still controlled something. By noon, she finally picked up the container and walked it straight to the trash bin outside. She didn't care if Gretchen saw. She hoped she did. By mid-afternoon, the temperature had risen. Late October in Georgia meant the sun still tried to pretend it was summer. Vanessa opened the windows and let a warm breeze pass through the house. The dog stretched lazily, eyes half closed, but ears always turning. Even in rest, they were listening. Then came the voice. "Excuse me." Vanessa tensed. It came from outside, from too close. She stepped onto the porch. Gretchen was standing at the bottom of the steps, both hands visibly empty now, posture slightly softer but still too practiced. "I don't mean to intrude," she said, her voice lighter than it had been the night before when she'd spoken to the dispatcher on the phone. "But I thought maybe we could talk." Vanessa said nothing. "I saw you throw them away," Gretchen added, nodding toward the trash bin. "The muffins, I understand." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "Do you?" "I was scared," Gretchen said. "It's not an excuse, there was a strange car and I didn't recognize you." "You didn't recognize me," Vanessa interrupted, her voice level but hard. "I've lived here for 3 years. You jog past my house every Saturday morning. You wave to Mr. Landry. You host book club 2 doors down." Gretchen flushed. I guess I just never noticed." "That's the problem," Vanessa said. "You never noticed, until you decided I didn't belong. I didn't think you were dangerous. You called the police. 4 of them showed up with weapons drawn. I had guns pointed at my head in my own driveway. My dogs stayed calm, because they're trained, but one false movement, one bark. What then?" Gretchen's lips parted, but no words came. Vanessa stepped down one stair. "You called the police on someone you've lived across from for over 1,000 days. But you only noticed me when you decided I was a threat." "I made a mistake," Gretchen said, almost a whisper. "I see that now." Vanessa studied her for a long, heavy moment. "Do you?" The silence stretched between them. "I used to tell myself I wasn't one of those people," Gretchen said suddenly, voice shaking. "I donate, I read, I've marched, but that night, I didn't even think. I just reacted. I saw something I didn't expect, and I panicked. I'm not proud of it." "You didn't panic," Vanessa replied. "You chose. That's the part you're afraid to admit. That it wasn't fear, it was a reflex, one you built over years." Gretchen swallowed. "What do I do now?" Vanessa stepped down one more stair. Now they stood face to face. The height difference was small, but the emotional space between them was vast. "You start by listening," Vanessa said, "to the parts of you that you pretend don't exist, the parts that clutch your purse when a black man walks by, the parts that teach your kids to call the cops before asking questions, the parts that think skin color determines danger." Gretchen's eyes were wet now, but no tears fell. "And you don't come to my door with muffins like this is some Lifetime movie. You don't get to absolve yourself with sugar and Tupperware. That's not how real harm works. Sorry, Gretchen said again, but this time it was softer. Not performative, not polished, just tired. Vanessa didn't forgive her. Not then. Maybe not ever. But she nodded once and turned back toward her door. You should go, she said without looking back, and you should think really hard before you ever pick up that phone again. She stepped inside. Echo stood there, waiting. Ace hadn't moved. She shut the door gently behind her, and for the first time in 2 days, the silence didn't feel dangerous. It felt earned. Vanessa's front door was barely closed when Echo turned his head toward the window. The change in his posture was subtle, a tightening of his muscles, a flick of his tail. Vanessa followed his gaze and saw the patrol car roll slowly past the cul-de-sac entrance again, the same cruiser that had circled the neighborhood earlier that week, maybe the same one from that night. She wasn't sure. They all looked the same when their lights were off and their curiosity was on. The engine didn't roar, it hummed, like it belonged there, like it wasn't trespassing. She stepped forward and pulled the curtain back just enough to see the officer behind the wheel. Not Buzzcut, not William. Think, a new one, younger, lighter complexion. She couldn't tell if he was scanning addresses or just pretending not to. He didn't stop, didn't wave, didn't even slow down. But the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. The moment Gretchen crossed her own threshold and vanished back inside her sanctuary of hardwood floors and farmhouse decor, the patrol car appeared, like someone had called. Again. Vanessa didn't wait. She moved to the side door, slid her boots on, and grabbed the leashes. She clipped them loosely onto Ace and Echo's collars, not to restrain them, but to show she was in control, just in case the world needed that visual again. They stepped outside together. The air had that late autumn bite now, just enough to make your lungs catch the first time you breathed in. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the street. Vanessa crossed the driveway and walked with deliberate pace toward the sidewalk. Ace and Echo stayed in perfect sync. One step behind her left heel, one step behind her right. As she rounded the corner, she spotted him. Buzzcut, not in uniform this time. Plain clothes, black jacket, jeans, ball cap pulled low. He was standing near the community mailbox cluster, like he had business there, like he wasn't just waiting. Her pulse didn't spike, her posture didn't change, but her mind sharpened. She walked straight toward him. He saw her, registered the dogs first, then her. She saw the flicker of recognition in his jaw, in the way his left hand dipped briefly to his belt out of muscle memory. Evening, she said flatly. Stewart, he replied, not smiling. You off duty or just slumming it out here without your vest? He gave a tight nod. Just picking something up. She looked around. Strange. Don't remember you living in this neighborhood. He didn't answer. Ace exhaled heavily beside her. Echo took a step forward but stopped when she shifted her weight. Buzzcut's eyes dropped to the dogs. They always this obedient? She didn't blink. They respond to tone, intention, posture. His hand curled slightly. I've seen them work. That night, I've never seen dogs freeze like that, like statues. They're not statues, she said. They're mirrors. He didn't seem to understand. She didn't help him. Buzzcut crossed his arms. The department's still reviewing the report. Captain Price's name is all over it. She's pushing hard. Vanessa nodded. She should be. There's talk, he continued, of training, sensitivity seminars, maybe even disciplinary measures. That's the least they can do. He looked down the street. You really think I'm racist? I don't need to think, she said calmly. I watched how you moved, where your eyes went, what your hand reached for. I watched you decide that everything I said was a lie before I said it." His mouth opened, then closed again. Ace's ears twitched. Buzzcut exhaled sharply. "I didn't wake up that morning looking to ruin anyone's life." "That's the problem," she replied. "You think racism looks like a plan, a costume, a slur. You don't realize it can sound like a routine, like just doing your job, like silence while the muzzle's aimed at someone's chest." He looked at the ground. "I've been doing this for a long time," he said after a beat. "I know," she said. "That's why it's worse." The silence hung heavy. "I didn't mean to escalate it," he muttered. "You did. I didn't mean to frighten you." "You did. I didn't mean for it to go that far." Vanessa stared at him. "But she did." Buzzcut looked like he might say something else, then didn't. Instead, he turned away, heading for a black pickup parked on the corner. He climbed in without looking back. Vanessa stood there until the taillights disappeared. She unclipped Ace and Echo's leashes and gave a short, precise whistle. The dogs moved forward. Not running, not eager, just confident, free. They walked with her back toward the house, their bodies relaxed now, heads higher, tails gently swaying. They knew the difference between tension and relief. They'd lived it. Vanessa reached her front door just as her phone buzzed. A new message. From an unknown number. The footage from that night's been leaked. Doorbell cam across the street. "You're going viral." She stared at it for a long second, then opened the browser. There it was, shared by a local community blog, then reshared by a regional news station. Then hundreds of times, by people she didn't know. People who didn't live on this block, who didn't know her name 24 hours ago. She hit play. The video started just before the cruisers rolled in. Showed her SUV pulling into the driveway, showed her stepping out, the officers arriving, guns drawn. Her standing still, and the moment, clear as glass, when Ace and Echo stepped from the vehicle, muzzles raised, bodies taut, eyes sharp. No barking, no lunging, just presence, command, of control. Vanessa paused the video at the exact frame where the entire scene froze. Officers in mid-step, the woman with the phone across the street, dropping her hand slightly. Power didn't always have to roar. Sometimes it stood still, unflinching. She turned off the phone. She looked down at Ace, then Echo. Released. The dogs broke formation and padded to their water bowls. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and breathed. For the first time in days, the silence didn't feel like waiting. And survival and victory all wrapped into one, and the whole world was finally watching. The video had only been online for 6 hours, but by the next morning it had over 400,000 views. Vanessa didn't go looking for it. She didn't need to. Her phone lit up with notifications faster than she could swipe them away. Tags, shares, DMs from people she hadn't spoken to in years, and plenty from people she'd never met. A flood of, "You're so brave, thank you for your service, I'm so sorry this happened to you," and buried in the mix, less polite ones. "You played the victim well. Should have just complied faster. I bet you trained those dogs to attack white people." She didn't reply to a single one. Instead, she sat at her dining table, with Echo laying under her chair, tail thumping lightly against the leg every few minutes like a metronome. Ace was perched beside the front door, alert but calm, his usual position when he knew Vanessa was deep in thought. She stared at her laptop, not at the video, at the email she was drafting. It was to Captain Ellen Price. Subject line, "Regarding the incident, follow-up request." She typed 3 paragraphs and deleted them twice. She didn't know if she was asking for justice, acknowledgement, or just a seat at the table where decisions were made about people like her without her voice in the room. She typed again. Captain Price, I've reviewed the video and the reports. I'd like to formally request an in-person meeting to discuss how the department plans to handle the outcome of this incident. Transparency matters. Accountability matters more. Let me know a date and time. Vanessa Stewart. She hit send. Then she closed the laptop and stared out the window, half hoping she'd feel something like relief. She didn't. What she felt was unfinished. Mid-morning brought a knock at the door. She didn't jump this time. Didn't pause. Ace and Echo both turned toward the sound. Echo gave a low hum, not quite a growl. Ace stayed quiet, but the hairs along his shoulders stiffened. Vanessa walked to the door and opened it without a word. Officer Nguyen stood there, uniform crisp, hat in hand, no squad car in sight. Just a man in uniform standing on the edge of a line he wasn't sure he could cross. "Ms. Stewart," he said, his voice measured. "Can I come in for a moment?" She didn't answer immediately, just stepped aside. He nodded in gratitude and entered, gaze scanning the room with the instincts of someone trained to look for threat first, details second. He noticed the awards on the shelf, the deployment photo near the fireplace, the perfectly rolled leash coiled beside the door. "Thanks," he said, still holding his hat. "I assume you're not here to serve anything," Vanessa said flatly. He cracked a tired smile. "No. I'm here because I couldn't stop thinking about that night." She crossed her arms, leaning against the wall. "You were the only one who hesitated. Why?" Nguyen exhaled. "Because something didn't feel right." The call came in vague, like a lot of these do. Suspicious person, possible break-in, unknown vehicle, standard stuff. But when I got out of the car and saw you, calm, hands up, just standing there, I knew it wasn't that. Then why didn't you stop it? Because stopping it outright would have made it worse. You saw Jennings. He doesn't get told to stand down easy. He escalates when people push. Vanessa stared at him. "So you didn't stop it. You played along, let him aim a weapon at me, let them search my home." "I didn't let them," he said quietly. "But I didn't stop them either. That's on me." She didn't soften. She didn't rescue him from the weight of it. Nguyen looked down at his hands. "We get trained to handle hostile encounters, tactical scenarios. We get seminars, tests, de-escalation drills, but nothing prepares you for when the hostility's coming from within your own unit, from your own gut telling you something's off." Vanessa's voice was quiet now. The moment Ace stepped out of the car, everything shifted. "I'd never seen anything like it," he said. "They didn't growl, didn't flinch, just stood there, looking like they were reading our minds. And in that moment, I think everyone realized we were the ones misreading the situation." She nodded once. That's what they're trained for, to read the room, to respond only when commanded. Nguyen looked at the dogs. "I knew they were military the moment I saw them. No civilian gets that kind of discipline. They've been with me longer than some people stay married." He smiled again, genuine this time. "We're undergoing new training. Department mandated. All field officers. Body cam reviews, bias recognition, scenario revisits. I think your video is going to be part of it." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "They're turning me into a training module?" "Not you. Your poise, your restraint, your dogs. The way that situation could have gone so wrong if you hadn't kept control, for everyone's sake." She didn't know how to feel about that, being turned into a case study. He continued, "Jennings is under review, might get moved off the street. Maybe worse, depends on the chief." "Shouldn't be anywhere near a weapon," Vanessa said, blunt. Ewan nodded slowly. "I agree." A pause settled between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with things that hadn't been said yet. "You know," Wynne said, voice softer now, "a lot of us, officers, I mean, we go through our whole careers never facing this, The real stuff. The subtle stuff. And when it shows up, it reveals who's really paying attention. And who isn't, she added. He nodded. Exactly. She took a slow breath. You didn't do the right thing that night. But you're doing it now. Wynne met her eyes. Trying to? She walked him to the door. Before he left, he turned to her one more time. If you ever wanted to consult, officially, I think the department could use your voice. Vanessa gave him a long look. Let's see how they handle accountability first. He gave a small, respectful nod and stepped off the porch. As she closed the door, Echo returned to her side, tail brushing her shin. She knelt down and pressed her forehead to his for a brief second, feeling the soft exhale from his nose. Ace sat nearby, still posted like a soldier. Vanessa whispered, "Freeze frame, huh?" Neither dog moved, just like they had that night. And that stillness, controlled, composed, undeniable, had become the single image now circling the country. It was a reminder, not of fear, but of power, held and never abused. Vanessa hadn't slept more than 3 hours since the video went viral. Not because of fear, not exactly. It was something deeper, something that moved under her skin like old injuries reacting to cold weather. Memory pain. Her body remembered how close it came to rupture. And her mind? It hadn't stopped rehearsing the moment, over and over. The click of boots, the sharp commands, the snap judgment made in the space of a single glance. That kind of memory didn't ask for permission. By Wednesday, her phone was ringing every couple of hours. Reporters, activists, politicians. A news producer from Atlanta asked if she'd be willing to share her side of the story, as if it hadn't already been shared, as if her stillness and composure weren't already dissected by strangers looking to make content out of her control. She ignored most of them, except one. It was an email, simple, direct, respectful. Vanessa Stewart, I work with a nonprofit that advocates for veteran reintegration and equitable law enforcement training. We saw the footage. We saw your name on the report, and we'd like to talk. When you're ready. Simone Dyer, Operations Director. Sentinel Groundwork. Vanessa didn't reply right away. Instead, she stared at the message while sitting on her back porch. Echo lay by the steps, paws crossed like he was waiting for something. Ace was at her side, his head resting near her boot. The sun was soft, filtered through thin clouds, and the only sound came from the wind brushing through the leaves of her sycamore. She had always known that attention came with a price, especially this kind of attention. But something about Simone's message felt different. It didn't ask her to be a symbol. It didn't ask her to bleed in public. It just asked if she was ready. That night, she called. Simone's voice was smooth, assured, not overly cheerful, not cloying, just steady. We're not looking to put a camera in your face, Vanessa, she said. We're looking to listen, and maybe create a platform for other veterans who come back home only to find they're still treated like suspects. Vanessa didn't speak right away. Simone continued, You did everything right, and it still almost got you killed. We believe your insight, your discipline, and yes, your silence speak louder than anything we've seen in years. Vanessa exhaled. I'm not looking to be a hero. We're not asking you to be. Another pause. Then Vanessa asked, Where are you based? Atlanta, Simone said, but we're mobile. We come to people. We listen where they're comfortable. Vanessa glanced down at Ace, then out toward the fence line of her backyard. Then come here. 3 days later, Simone arrived. She was younger than Vanessa expected. Maybe mid-30s, sharp eyes behind thin-framed glasses, wearing a charcoal gray jacket and Converse sneakers. No entourage, no camera crew, just a single canvas notebook and a smile that didn't overstay its welcome. You've got a good setup, Simone said, looking around the house. Clean, efficient. Habit, Vanessa replied. Hard to unlearn. They sat at the dining table, the same one where Vanessa had once laid out blueprints for a forward operating base outside Baghdad, where she later taught Echo how to stay for 5-minute intervals without flinching. That table had seen war planning and dog training and too many cups of midnight coffee to count. "So," Simone began, flipping open her notebook, "if you don't mind, I'd like to start at the beginning. Not just the incident, but your beginning, wherever that is." Vanessa looked at her for a moment, and then, slowly, began. She told her about her deployment, her decision to enlist at 19 when college felt impossible and staying home felt worse, about her mother's quiet worry and her father's awkward pride, about the sandstorms, the burn pits, the friendships made in tents and broken by explosions, about Ace's first mission and the time Echo alerted to a collapsed civilian under rubble and refused to move until they dug her out. She told her about coming back, the silence of civilian life, the discomfort in grocery aisles, the way people said "thank you for your service" like a password, never sticking around to hear the real story. And then she told her about the night in her driveway. She didn't cry, didn't raise her voice. She told it the same way she'd learned to write incident reports, clearly, completely, with no unnecessary drama. The drama was already baked into the truth. Simone didn't interrupt once. When it was over, she closed her notebook and sat back. "You ever think about teaching?" she asked softly. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Teaching what?" "Situational discipline, emotional command, real-world consequences of bias." Vanessa let out a small, tired laugh. "You want me to stand in a room of cops and teach them not to kill people who look like me?" Simone didn't flinch. "I want you to teach them what control actually looks like, because they're confusing dominance with security, and you're living proof of the difference." Vanessa leaned back. "I'd need a hell of a budget." "We've got one. And protection. We'll make sure of it." Another silence. And then Vanessa looked toward the back room, where both dog crates sat, open and empty. No longer confinement, just comfort zones. She stood, stretched, and said, "I'll think about it." Simone smiled. "That's all I came for." As she left, she paused near the front door. "By the way," she said, "we're hosting a round table next month. Veteran-led. You wouldn't be alone." Vanessa nodded slowly. "Maybe it's time I stopped being." After the door closed, Vanessa sat back down and stared at her hands. They'd gripped rifles, leashes, steering wheels. They'd broken up fights, given commands, pulled bodies from wreckage. They'd held fear and held firm in the face of it. Now they rested still, not shaking, not angry, just ready. That night, as the sky turned the color of bruised steel, Vanessa opened the crate doors and softly said, "Come." Ace and Echo stepped out together. And just like that, another command passed. One that wasn't about staying frozen in place, feeling, but moving forward. The knock on her door this time wasn't sharp or urgent. It was quiet, hesitant. Vanessa wiped her hands on a towel and approached slowly. Ace was already halfway to the door, not barking, just watching. Echo was farther back, nose twitching. She cracked the door open, not wide. Officer Gwynn stood on the porch again, shoulders slightly slumped, his patrol car nowhere in sight. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Twice in 1 week." Gwynn half smiled. "I'm not here officially. Mind if I step in?" She hesitated a beat longer than last time, then pulled the door open wider. "Leave your badge at the threshold." He nodded as he entered. Vanessa motioned to the table. Gwynn sat, careful like someone trying not to offend the floor. He looked around the room. Same photos, same silence. Vanessa didn't sit yet. "Something tells me this isn't a wellness check." Gwynn looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "It's about Jennings." She crossed her arms. "Let me guess. He's still working?" Nguyen shook his head. "Suspended. Pending review." She didn't react. "There's a problem, though," he added, words getting around the department. "Not about what happened, that's all on the official record, but about you." Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "About me? Some of the guys, they're saying you set him up, that you used the dogs to provoke us, that you wanted to go viral." Vanessa gave a short, incredulous laugh. "And who exactly do they think planted the cops on my lawn?" Nguyen sighed. "I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying this is how things get twisted." She stared at him. "Do they know how much control it takes to give a command and not use it? I could have unleashed chaos. I didn't. I know. I stood still while people with guns and assumptions surrounded me in my own driveway. I didn't film it. I didn't share it. And they think I wanted this?" Nguyen looked down. "Some of them are uncomfortable, not with what happened, with how clear it is that they were wrong." Vanessa finally said, "Let them be uncomfortable. They're pushing back against the disciplinary action," he said. "Union stepping in, trying to say Jennings was within protocol." "Was he?" "No." Vanessa leaned forward. "Then let them talk." Nguyen met her eyes. "It's going to get louder. The union doesn't want Jennings to be made an example, and some of the older officers think this'll make them hesitant in future calls." Vanessa leaned back, her voice cold. "Good. Maybe hesitation will keep someone else alive." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Gwenson said, "Price wants to meet with you again. She's trying to build internal support for better training programs. Thinks you could help push it through." "I already gave her my answer," Vanessa said. "I'm not here to fix what your department refuses to face." "I think you're underestimating how much you've already changed it," he replied. She shook her head. "Change doesn't happen in memos or PowerPoints. It happens when men like Jennings don't get to show up at someone's house with his ego cocked like a loaded weapon." Nguyen stood. "For what it's worth, I think you're right. And I think Jennings knows he's in deep." Vanessa followed him to the door. "Then let him drown in it." He hesitated before stepping out. "You're not the story they wanted, but you might be the story they needed." She gave him a look. "Don't make me a quote, N." He smiled faintly, then laughed. Vanessa shut the door and turned, finding Ace sitting exactly where he had been the whole time, eyes locked on her. He didn't blink. She walked over and knelt beside him, placing a hand on his chest. "You knew before I did," she whispered. Echo trotted over, nudging her shoulder with his nose. She sat there on the floor between them, let the weight of it settle. The accusation, the murmurs behind closed doors, the fear disguised as denial. She was never naive. She knew people would talk, that someone would try to rewrite what happened, not with facts but with feeling, with narratives designed to protect the fragile systems that let it happen in the first place. But she also knew something else. Footage didn't blink. No matter how the story twisted, that moment, her stillness, the dog's discipline, the raw fear in the eyes of men holding weapons, was caught on camera. Permanent, unarguable. Let them talk. Let them scramble. She was done asking for clarity from people who refused to see her clearly in the first place. Later that evening, she opened her email again. Another message from Simone. "Roundtable is locked in for November 14. He'll be speaking last. You okay with that?" Vanessa stared at it for a while before typing back. "Let them hear everything before they meet, the reason they should have listened sooner." She hit send. That night she pulled out her journal. Not the neat one, the old one, the one from her last deployment. Pages crinkled from sand and water, edges worn thin. She flipped to the back, and began a new entry. October 27. They still think silence is permission. But I've learned silence can also be pressure, can also be proof, can also be power. Let's see what they do when it speaks. When she finished, she placed the journal back in the drawer beside her bed and turned off the light. And in the dark, Echo sighed against the floorboards while A stood watch beside the window, eyes open, always ready. The doorbell rang just after 8 a.m. on a Monday. A full week had passed since the footage surfaced. 7 days of headlines, hashtags, and awkward phone calls from city officials who spoke like they were reading from cue cards. Vanessa didn't bother opening the door right away. Instead, she looked through the peephole, watched the woman standing on the porch, black blazer, clipboard in hand, the look of someone who rehearsed conversations in elevators. Vanessa sighed. She opened the door halfway. "Ms. Stewart?" the woman asked. "I'm Keisha Ford, Public Affairs Liaison for the Mayor's office." Vanessa raised her eyebrows. "Liaison? Not a cop, not a journalist. I'm somewhere in between. I was asked to meet with you." Vanessa didn't answer. Keisha cleared her throat. "The mayor would like to arrange a statement. He'd prefer to meet with you in person if you're open to it. If not, he's asked me to gather your perspective or support." Vanessa leaned against the doorframe. "Support for what, exactly?" "For the reforms he's proposing, policy adjustments, training mandates. He believes your voice could help push them through." Vanessa tilted her head. "He's trying to clean up the mess before it hits his re-election campaign." Keisha didn't deny it. "I wouldn't pretend politics isn't part of this, but it's also an opportunity. Opportunity for me to be used. Opportunity to lead," Keisha replied gently. "On your own terms." Vanessa studied her. She wasn't young, early 40s maybe. Her eyes were tired but sharp, like someone who'd sat through too many closed-door meetings and bitten her tongue more times than she could count. "Have you ever had a gun pointed at you for unlocking your own front door?" Vanessa asked. Keisha blinked. "No." "Then don't ask me to lend credibility to people who only started caring once the internet cared." Keisha didn't flinch. "That's fair, but you do have power now, whether you wanted it or not." Vanessa stepped out and closed the door behind her. "Let me show you something." She led Keisha around the side of the house to the back fence. Echo followed at a quiet trot, head low, eyes watching everything. She unlatched the gate and stepped into the yard. In the center stood a weathered training pole, faded from years of sun, but still upright. At its base, a thick rubber chew sat half buried in dirt. Echo padded over to it, sniffed once, then sat beside it like he was waiting for instruction. "This is where I retrained Echo after we came back," Vanessa said. "He flinched at fireworks, froze at slamming doors, couldn't even handle the sound of metal on metal." Keisha watched in silence. "It took months, not because he didn't know commands, but because he didn't know what to do with silence. He thought it meant something was about to explode." Keisha's lips parted, just barely. "That's what this country does to people like me. Like him. It teaches us to hear silence and brace for damage, to freeze when we should be able to rest." Keisha looked down at Echo, then back at Vanessa. "What do you want?" "I want the silence to mean something different. I want it to signal peace, not the pause before sirens." Keisha nodded slowly. "Then, help us change that." Vanessa turned away. "Let me think." Back inside, she poured herself a cup of black coffee and let it cool while she reviewed her inbox again. Another invitation. This time from a major podcast. National reach, live audience. She deleted it. She had already said yes to one thing. The round table, November 14th. She was the closing voice. Simone had sent her the list of other panelists. a formerly incarcerated black man turned youth counselor, a white female veteran who experienced PTSD, second-hand escalation by local police, a mother whose teenage son was killed in a mistaken identity stop. All of them had something at stake. None of them were political pawns. The location was a civic center in East Atlanta. No press, just conversation. That Vanessa could handle. That she welcomed. But the closer the day came, the louder the world seemed to get. Headlines churned, news cycles spun faster than reality could move. And still, Vanessa hadn't spoken publicly. Not one word. And that silence, it made them uncomfortable. The city waited for her to rage, to forgive, to explain, to narrate the trauma in a tone that made it easier to digest. But she stayed still. The kind of stillness that made people nervous. The kind that held truth without offering it on a plate. On November 14th, Vanessa arrived at the round table 15 minutes early. The room was simple, folding chairs in a circle, bottled water in the middle, no cameras, no stage. Simone greeted her with a nod. "You don't have to prove anything tonight. You just have to speak." Vanessa nodded back. "That's the hard part." As the session began, others shared first. One by one, stories filled the space. Pain wasn't shouted, it was named, reclaimed. When it was her turn, the room fell quieter than before. Vanessa looked around at the people gathered. The ones who had bled and bent and broken, but were still here, still breathing. She took a breath. "When I served overseas," she began, "we learned that silence could save your life. That movement gave you away. That stillness was a strategy." A few heads nodded. "But silence shouldn't be necessary in your driveway, or your kitchen, or your country." She paused. "I didn't want this story. I didn't ask for it. But I own it now, and I won't let anyone else define what it means." She looked toward Simone. "I'm not going to be your spokesperson. I'm going to be your boundary." The room held still. Then someone clapped. One person. Then another. And the sound grew. Not loud, not thunderous, but steady, intentional, respectful. Afterward, a young woman approached Vanessa in the parking lot. She was maybe 22, nervous, wearing a faded hoodie and scuffed sneakers. "I saw your video," she said. "It made me feel like stillness could be strength. Like I didn't have to perform pain to be heard." Vanessa smiled. "You don't." The girl nodded, then walked away. And for the first time in weeks, Vanessa let herself smile. Not out of relief, but recognition, because the silence wasn't empty anymore. It echoed. The wind carried the faint sound of kids laughing. Leaves danced down the street in little circles as the morning sun cast long golden beams across Vanessa's driveway. The world felt new, or maybe it was just finally visible. The same street, the same trees, but something had shifted. It was in the air now, in the glances of her neighbors as they passed by, in the way no one clutched their keys tighter when she walked near. They saw her now, not just as the lady with the dogs, not just the veteran, but as someone whose stillness had moved a mountain. She opened her front door, leash in hand, not because Ace or Echo needed it, but because habit still kept one hand tethered to order. Ace padded out first, then Echo. They didn't bolt, they didn't sniff for danger. They walked like kings beside a queen, measured, alert, and calm. As they reached the sidewalk, Mr. Landry waved from across the street. "Morning, Vanessa," he called, newspaper tucked under one arm. "Dog still walking you, or did you finally win that tug of war?" She chuckled. "We reached a treaty." He laughed. "Let me know when they offer you the presidency." She continued down the block, her boots tapping softly on the concrete. A jogger passed her, young, earbuds in. He gave her a nod, not a flinch. Not the kind of nervous smile she used to get, like people weren't sure whether to say hi or cross the street. Just a real nod, human to human. Vanessa stopped at the end of the cul-de-sac where the sidewalk widened around a small bench beneath an old oak tree. She sat. Ace laid at her feet. Echo stretched out with a satisfied groan and dropped his head onto her boot. From here she could see the Marks' house. For a long moment she just watched. And then the front door opened. Gretchen stepped outside with a watering can in her hand. She froze for a second when she saw Vanessa sitting there. Vanessa didn't look away. She didn't smile, but she didn't turn either. She simply held the moment. Gretchen raised one hand in a small wave. Vanessa raised her eyebrows, then gave a single nod. And that was all. No speeches, no forced apologies, just an acknowledgement. And that was enough. She stood and continued walking. 2 more houses down, a woman she didn't know was kneeling in her front garden. White, maybe mid-30s, auburn curls tied back. She looked up. "Hi," she said. Vanessa offered a short wave. "Morning." "I saw you on the panel," the woman said, brushing dirt from her knee. "That thing? In Atlanta. You were the last one." Vanessa paused. "Yeah, that was me. You said something about silence, about it being a kind of pressure. I liked that." Vanessa nodded. "Thanks. You made me think about my son. He's only 12, but I'm starting to realize what kind of world he's watching." Vanessa didn't respond, but she held the eye contact. "Anyway," the woman added, smiling softly, "welcome to the neighborhood." Vanessa let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "I've been here 3 years," she said. The woman blinked. "Oh, then maybe I'm the one who's late." Vanessa smiled. "Better late than ever." She kept walking. The route was the same as always. Around the cul-de-sac, past the community mailbox cluster, up the hill that overlooked the little retention pond where ducks gathered on spring mornings. But it all felt different now. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because it had tilted slightly. Because she had held the line, and others had started noticing where it was drawn. When she returned home, there was a small envelope on her doorstep. No address, no stamp. Inside was a card. No name, just handwriting. Not everyone in this neighborhood knew what to say, but we were watching and learning. "Thank you." Vanessa held the card in her hand for a long time before setting it on the table beside the crate. Not on the fridge, not in the trash. Just there, like a marker. She brewed a pot of coffee, let the smell fill the room. She took her mug to the back porch where the light streamed across the grass and danced on Echo's fur. Ace was lying in his usual post near the steps, ears flicking with every rustle of wind. She sat, raved. Her phone buzzed, but she didn't look at it. Not yet. The noise could wait. This silence, this peace, she had earned it. A bird landed on the fence, chirped once, flew away. And then Echo let out a low, slow bark. Not a warning, a greeting. Vanessa turned her head and saw a child standing near the fence. A little girl with beaded braids and a backpack too big for her shoulders. She was staring at Ace with wide eyes. "Is he friendly?" the girl asked. Vanessa stood and walked over. "He's very well trained." The girl grinned. "He looks like a statue." Vanessa nodded. "He moves when he needs to." The girl looked up. "Can I pet him?" Vanessa glanced at Ace, then back to the girl. "You can try," she said, "but only if you ask him, not me." The girl looked at Ace and whispered, "Hi." Ace blinked slowly. She reached out and touched his head. He didn't flinch. Her smile lit up the whole yard. Vanessa watched how the moment unfolded, without fear, without tension. Watched how a child saw a powerful animal and didn't feel threatened. watched how the animal let that child in with trust. She closed her eyes for a second and let the warmth settle in her chest. This was it. This was the win. Not the viral clip. Not the panel. Not the emails from politicians. The safety of it. The simplicity of peace. The quiet. Vanessa whispered under her breath, barely audible. Her street, her rules. And for once, the world agreed.